Here we go. All right, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Chem Biochem session tonight. We're really excited to have everyone joining us here tonight. My name is Emily Bucco. I work in the admissions office as one of the counselors, and I'm really thrilled to welcome you all to our virtual setting tonight. I've got some great professors here who are going to share some information with you. I do want to let you know a couple of things. We're using the Zoom webinar format tonight, so you should be able to see the three of us, and we can certainly see you on our attendees list, but we can't actually see you. We want to make sure that as the presentation goes on tonight, please feel free to use the Q&A, which you can access to ask questions, which we will answer live during the presentation. So anything that comes up for you, please feel free to throw them in there. We are recording this session, so if you missed anything or want to go back and catch something, we're going to post that onto the website within a week or so not to worry there, hopefully sooner. But having said that, what I'm going to do is actually turn things over to you two. Arna, if you want to introduce yourself first, and then we'll go from there and get things started.
Hi, yeah, welcome. I'm happy that you guys join us this evening. My name is Arne Gericke. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Chemistry Biochemistry, former department head. I'm now Associate Dean of Undergraduate Studies. And in terms of teaching, I'm teaching freshman chemistry as well as some upper division courses like biophotonics and other things. And with regards of my own research, I'm always happy to involve undergrad students in my research. And I'm a biophysical chemist studying lipid-mediated protein functions, in particular sickling lipids like phosphoinositides that are involved in several disease states like neurological diseases, cancer, and other things. With that, I'm turning it over to John McDonald.
Hey, my name is John McDonald. I've been a faculty member for way too long, 20 years. I have a background as organic chemistry, and I will, I have to apologize. One of the we only do this in person, and it's more of a just a get together chat where you can ask questions as we present things about the department. So what I'll do today is, and I will walk you through some of the basics of things about our department. And if you do have questions, feel free to type them into the question and answer. But also at the end, I'm going to give you my email, and it would prefer, if you think something after the fact or would prefer to chat one-on-one, I would be happy to have a Zoom session with you, or to correspond by email, or to chat on the phone, even though nobody actually does that anymore, whatever it takes. So if you think of something after the fact, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me or with Arna, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. So what we'll now is,
can I interrupt you for 1 second? You have some echo. I don't know whether, am I the only one who's hearing this, or is it also, Emily, are you hearing the echo, or is it only me?
Yeah, I was hearing the echo too, and I'm not quite sure why. I don't know.
Are you still hearing it now?
Oh, yes, yep. But only on like the last word of your sentence.
I don't know. If I get closer, does that help?
Maybe, I don't know, turn off the speaker for a moment while you give the presentation.
Yeah, why don't you, anyway, fire up the presentation. Okay, so I want to just a little bit about our department. There are just under 5,000 undergraduates at WPI. We, as far as Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, are 20 faculty who you've seen here, and in large part to the efforts of Arna and some of his predecessors. These faculty, we've been very careful in hiring to try and make sure that the faculty have expertise in all of the current areas and cutting edge areas of chemistry. both in terms of what we teach you formally in the classroom, also what we would teach you if you get involved in research in our laboratories. And so these 20 faculty span all of sort of traditional areas of chemistry, organic, inorganic, physical, biochemistry, analytical chemistry, but also have very interdisciplinary interests that span materials and engineering disciplines as well. And so, you know, the one thing that we really take pride in, it's our sort of bread and butter, is be good at teaching. It's the most important thing we do. But we also, most of us have funded research programs, and so we have a small graduate program in addition to our undergraduate programs. And that's really important because we're able to, when we teach courses, to bring our expertise in terms of research into this room to make what you're learning more relevant and put it in the text of what's being done today in terms of search. And so, anyway, this is faculty. Next slide, please. You know, because we do research in teaching, we've put a lot of effort at WPI into trying to get you involved in both in terms, obviously, the teaching, but also in terms of the research as well. And we feel it's important because learning, you know, a discipline like chemistry or biochemistry isn't just simply absorbing that material which you read in a textbook here in the classroom, but it's actually being able to put that into the context of actually your hands dirty, figuring out how to do research as well. And so the difference that we put into that, kind of gratifying to see that's been recognized. And a few years ago, we were rated #1 in the country as an institution for combining both teaching and research. And I think that speaks well of people's how much we care about bringing both of those into to you. And so, next slide, please.
John, let me take over. The echo is still pretty bad.
Okay.
So what you see here is a glimpse of our state-of-the-art laboratories, teaching laboratories, where we teach all the relevant disciplines. So general chemistry, you see here suites down here for general chemistry. This one is for organic chemistry, and equally we have classroom dedicated to biochemistry and physical chemistry. And as you can see, they're very modern, and they have been designed specifically to meet our way of teaching, which is project-based. You will work a lot in groups on solving distinct problems, starting already in the general chemistry sequence. And these classrooms are very much optimized for that way of teaching and giving you lots of hands-on experience. As you can see here, for example, this is one of the instrument suites, and we have several stations consisting of a infrared spectrometer, a gas chromatograph, and the UV-Vis spectrometers, and we have a total of 7 of those, so that in a particular lab, every group has its dedicated station, so that you get exposure to using these kinds of instruments. So I already said that we are one of the strengths are project-based education, and most of our lecture and laboratory classes have a project component. And for example, starting out already in our general chemistry sequence, you will see in a minute, you have projects you will be working on that sort of mimic how you would function in a research lab or later in a company. The majority of our lecture classes are associated with laboratory courses, so we really place a very strong emphasis on giving you hands-on experience in using instrumentation and applying chemical techniques. And we have a lot of high-end instrumentation available to us in our regular teaching laboratories, like, for example, nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy. John, can you mute yourself?
Okay. Hold on 1 second.
So to tell you how we integrate generally projects in our entire curriculum. So in the first year, you have university-wide the Great Problem Seminar, which are seminars which are built around the main challenging our societies are faced with, like feed the world, power the world, environmental aspects, and several other seminars along those lines. And in terms of chemistry, you have the General Chemistry Lab series. In the second year, you would have the Chemistry Experimental Lab series, and I will give you in a minute a little bit more details about this, and the Humanities and Arts requirement. WPI strives to teach you science in a societal context. Obviously, when we do chemistry, we are not operating independent of the society around us, and many of our doings impact society and interact with society. So you should reflect upon this. Like you might have heard, for example, about a technique like CRISPR, which you will learn in our biochemistry labs. And CRISPR has some societal aspects that are certainly something that we want to look very carefully at, so that we are not doing something that does more harm than good to society. And that's why it's important to have these kinds of humanities and arts requirements along also with social sciences classes. And to talk more about the arts component, what we found that many of our students are actually very interested in aspects of arts, particularly music. We have a very active orchestra where students are playing in, and we had over the years several students who are major or minor in music in addition to chemistry. So it's enrichment you can look forward to. In the third year, then we have the Biochemistry Lab series in the department, and in university-wide, the interactive qualifying project. We have around the world more than 40 project centers where students can go and carry out projects which are given to us from typically NGOs, but also other entities. And what you will learn there is you're fully immersed in a different society. You learn how your work can impact that society in a positive way. And in addition, you learn a lot of soft skill, like working towards deadlines, presenting in front of the sponsor, which sometimes are very high-ranking officials. You're learning to write reports about this. And you're learning also to work in an interdisciplinary group, which is quite frankly how chemistry and biochemistry these days work when you go to industry. So it's a very important piece where you acquire a lot of soft skills. And finally, in the fourth year, you have the major qualifying project, which is a senior thesis project in your major, where you carry out a genuine research project in one of our research labs. And the ultimate goal would be to get something to a publication in a peer-reviewed journal, which sometimes happens, but in general, it's something where you investigate something new and unique. So to tell you a little bit background on the labs. So in the first year, you have the General Chemistry Lab series, which is very different to what you experience in high school. In high school, if you had some good labs, you were given sort of a recipe and you're carrying out an experiment following that lab description or recipe, if you wish. In our case, you will be given a project, you're given a goal, and you have to figure out how to reach that goal. So it's much more like a real research project where you have to sort of analyze the problem, you have to come up with an experimental design, you have to test it, and then you potentially have to redesign it. And that is exactly how research is conducted. And you will be right out of the gate being taken to a much higher level than what you're used to from high school. So the example what I'm giving here is you will make gold nanoparticles, which may or may not be functionalized with other chemical groups. And you will analyze these gold nanoparticles, for example, with respect to size. What is shown here, that these gold nanoparticles can absorb light at very specific frequencies based upon their size. And sort of apologize, I said absorb. What I meant was fluorescence light. And here you can see the spectra and how the fluorescence spectrum shifts to the red as your gold nanoparticle becomes larger. And so that would be one of the very early projects, which you do something like 2 or 3 weeks in after arriving at WPI. At the more advanced level, we have 4 courses in the sophomore years. Analytical instrumental chemistry, where you learn how to use instrumentation like gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, and other advanced analytical methods. Then you move on to the physical chemistry lab. There, physical chemistry is about understanding chemical reactions and chemical properties through experiments. So what is shown here, for example, is a calorimeter, where you can measure the heat evolution of a reaction, in this case, the burning of a sample. And then you move from there to the organic chemistry lab. There you learn, obviously, to synthesize fairly complex organic chemical molecules. And you, in addition, learn also to analyze those samples using either what is shown here, infrared spectroscopy, or nuclear magnetic resonance spectrometry and mass spectrometry. Finally, this is capped in the sophomore year with the inorganic chemistry lab, which again is a lab that is advanced synthetic methods. And one outcome of this, the way this lab is actually designed, you are producing something that is new, so it's not something that is sort of off the shelf, which has been done by many before. And a couple of years ago, we actually got out of a group of students who worked in that lab a full-blown publication, because they synthesized molecules that were related to each other but had different properties.
Finally, Yvonne, can I jump in? Just one more comment to this. So most institutions, when you take these labs, they're usually associated with a course. So you take organic, you take an organic lab. You take physical chemistry, you take a physical lab. So if you don't take one of those courses until your senior year, you won't go into the laboratory that experience until that point. So we offer these standalone courses. And by the end of your sophomore year, with these skills and this experience, your background, you can step into anybody's laboratory and get involved in research. And so that's one of the beauties of this, that it sort of loads up front all of this experience so that you then put that into practice. And that's different than most institutions.
Thank you, John. So in the junior year, for those of you who are interested in biochemistry, you would move to the biochemistry lab sequence. It's actually now 3 courses. What we show here is 2 courses. One is protein structure and function, where you learn to handle protein material. You learn how to express proteins or to make proteins and then isolate them and characterize them. And the second biochemistry lab is genetic engineering. So there you actually introduce mutations to express proteins, and you can make very unique products, and you learn things like CRISPR and many other of the very advanced genetic engineering techniques. The third course we've just started to teach is biophotonics. In general, in the life sciences, more and more techniques rely on characterizing samples using photonic techniques that use light in the broadest sense. And we have now a course on the books which teach you very advanced microscopy, but also the advanced techniques of fluorescence spectroscopy and microscopy, things like super resolution microscopy and many other things. So that's the third lab out of this sequence. We are a research university, and for you as an undergraduate student, that has multiple upsides. First of all, we encourage our students to get involved in research in our research laboratories as early as possible. I have regularly students joining me towards the second half of the freshman year in my lab to start doing research, and many of my colleagues do exactly the same thing. What you can see here is simply a range of advanced instrumentation, like advanced microscope, or here an X-ray machine, or a nuclear magnetic resonance spectrometer. So that's the autosampler, and this is the sample there. And so the upside to working in the research lab is that you learn even more advanced techniques than you learn in the regular teaching labs, and you are exposed to instrumentation that is simply, in terms of the cost, way above that what one could do in a regular teaching lab. And to give you an idea, in my lab alone, we have instrumentation which is probably worth somewhere around $1.5 to $2 million, and undergraduate students regularly use that instrumentation to conduct research. These are areas we are having in our department represented. So we have, on one hand, groups who are working in the area of materials. So this is, for example, a MOF, if I'm not mistaken, John, Nick, nod me if that's true, where you have a host-guest scenario. These MOFs, which are stand for metal organic frameworks, can host guest molecules and can be used for a variety of applications, including drug delivery, which John with two other groups works very closely on. We have groups that work in system biology, who investigate structure and function of proteins. We have a physical chemistry group which works in the area of photovoltaics and energy production. Several groups are working in cell signaling. What you see here on the left is drug delivery. Again, several groups are working on that. And I think we all learned in the context of the vaccine how important actually the drug delivery aspect is, because if we would have not the lipid nanoparticles that deliver the mRNA, we would not have an mRNA vaccine. And finally, we have one colleague, Destin Hallman, who works on viral cancer therapy, where you actually utilize viruses to treat and attack cancer. And then we have organic chemistry, synthetic groups who work on the synthesis of pharmaceuticals. So they would be in the area of medicinal chemistry. That leads me to the major qualifying project, which is a senior thesis project, which all WPI students have to carry out. And in contrast to other institutions where you have a senior thesis project in a sort of more limited fashion, our students work either a full term, meaning 7 weeks full time on these projects, or even longer. Very often students spread it out over the entire senior year and working on their thesis. And these theses are very substantial, and as I said, very often lead to publications in peer-reviewed journals. I have sent off a couple of months ago a paper with only an undergraduate student on it to Biophysical Journal, which is a major journal in the area of biochemistry. We also have opportunities for our students to work on NQPs on and off campus. So there are on one hand companies we collaborate with. This is something that varies from year to year a little bit, depending on the needs of the companies. But one thing which we always have is the nearby UMass Medical School. The medical school is approximately 10 minutes from WPI, and we have a shuttle service or a driving service over there to the medical school. and students can go onto a portal which is shared between WPI and the medical school and look for projects colleagues over there at the medical school are offering, and can then conduct research with those colleagues. And by the way, that portal also works earlier. So we have also students who regularly use this portal to find internship opportunities over at the medical school much earlier than their senior year. We have every year across the different departments that are sort of doing biomedical research, we have give or take 40 to 50 students who carry out their senior thesis project over at the medical school, including somebody like Craig Mello, who regularly accepts MPP students who received a couple of years ago a Nobel Prize for his RNA-related research. We have paid research opportunities for the summer. On one hand, we have a alumnus who donated money to the university, or more specific to the chemistry and the biology departments, to provide students with the opportunity to conduct paid research over the summer. We also have regularly students paid off our research grants. The department receives annually roughly $1.5 to $2 million in research grants. And for you as a student, undergrad students, the advantage is manifold there. Research is expensive, in particular biochemical research. So by having research grants, we can give you opportunities we otherwise would not be able to give you. You would simply participate in our research, which is funded by NIH, NSF, and other organizations. But also we can make available through these research grants fellowship opportunities in addition to the ones which are endowed or are available across the university through various means. So when and how do I choose an MQP advisor, and what if I want to get involved in research earlier? The best way is to go to the departmental webpage and navigate to the faculty listings and see what faculty are doing. And then there's hopefully something that interests you. You set up an appointment with that particular faculty member and go in an interview, and then hopefully from there it works out. At this point, I can say that every student who would like to get involved in research can find a home to do research, either in our groups here on campus or over at the medical school. So everybody who wants to do research can do research, and I encourage you to do so, irrespective of where you will end up at the end in terms of institution. These are sort of the areas chemists get employed in, and it's pretty much everywhere. I mean, it's really a broad portfolio. You are not pitched into one area, meaning you have to do bench research for the rest of your life. If that's not what you are interested in, there are many other areas you may want to get involved in. And I encourage you to visit the American Chemical Society page, where they have, especially for high school students, pages about career possibilities and what chemists are doing the interview with a range of colleagues. And I encourage you to visit those sites if you want to inform yourself a little bit more about what do chemists do. These are sort of current salary levels. So chemistry is a very mature discipline in terms of employment. And what I mean by that, the employment doesn't fluctuate dramatically anymore in a way that it goes way up and then all of a sudden there's a collapse. It's a fairly steady state. In the moment, there's a very strong demand for chemists and biochemists, particularly in the biotech sector. Here in Massachusetts, our students flying off the shelves, literally. Those students who want to go straight to industry find a job before or shortly after graduation. In general, WPI students, 98% of all students have found their new stepping stone by July 1st after graduation. So we have a very, very strong record of placing students. Some students decide to move on to get a PhD. That's an important aspect. I know that seems to be very far away and to think about. But one thing what you should know right out of the gate is that a graduate education, PhD education in the sciences in general is a freebie, meaning you will be hired by a university as a graduate assistant. So you get a moderate salary, which I always say it's large enough to survive and low enough that you don't constantly travel, meaning get your PhD done. And but most importantly, you get free tuition. Our students, when they graduate with a good GPA, can essentially pick and choose. I had a student in my group, she graduated admittedly with a 4.0, and she had offers from Berkeley, Stanford, Caltech, Harvard, Brown, Columbia, and a couple more, I forget else. But even with a GPA of 3.5, 3.6 from WPI, you still can move on to a top tier institution. For example, we have regularly students who go with a GPA of 3.5, 3.4, move on to Cornell University. And that shows you that the WPI degree is worth a lot as you are making the next step. In general, what is the WPI experience? The WPI experience really prepares you for the world, and our hands-on classes allow you to get exposure to those things that are really highly relevant to your future work. And I would also like to stress, for those of you who are interested in moving on to medical school, we have also an exceptionally good record to place our students in top tier medical school. And as you come into WPI, you get assigned a special advisor. And I know there are other sessions specifically aimed at medical school students, and I encourage you to attend those. But I would like to point out that biochemistry is one of the degrees, or the only degree, which allows you to fulfill all your requirements for medical school without taking any extra classes than those that are required to get the biochemistry degree.
I wanted one other comment about that, and that we keep in touch with graduates, our alums, and to find out, and they end up hiring a lot of WPI, graduates in MS and biochemists into the companies that they work at, and their feedback is that because of the project-based approach, so go out into the real world and try to solve a problem. Don't work on that problem alone. You always work on those problems as part of a much bigger team, because just too complex for any single one person to tackle. And because we have this consistency in working in teams, what happens, and the fact that we have a quarter system where it's pretty intense in terms of coursework. Usually our graduates are able to step into history and just immediately adapt to that, because it's not that different from what we've been doing for 4 years. And that's very different than if it comes from a typical kind of semester-based typical curriculum where there isn't as much of teamwork in terms of problem solving and tackling big problems. And so that tends to translate to you guys being very successful and be able to adapt when you step into companies and just kick butt away.
I would also like to draw your attention to a teacher prep program which we have in place, which allows you to complete in 4 years the initial teaching license in Massachusetts, and at the same time you get the bachelor's in the STEM field, so you get both. This sort of lays out how that is achieved. I don't want to necessarily talk you through each step right now because you can read that. But most importantly, we also have, in conjunction with that, a National Science Foundation funded program in place which provides scholarships for 2 years. You apply for those in your sophomore years, and as part of this teacher scholarship program, you receive additional training in career council, and the requirements is that you commit to teaching 2 years in a high needs school for each 1 year of scholarship you have received. And obviously, there's a great program for those of you who want to move on to a teaching position. We also prepare you actively for the next step. I mean, this is a picture of Jocelyn Mendes, who was awarded a NSF Graduate Research Fellowship Program. So that is something beyond WPI. So she had that program, that scholarship in place, and was able to apply then to graduate schools. And obviously, everybody wanted her because she is essentially a free student for them. And on top of that, it's an incredible achievement to receive one of these super competitive fellowships. And we work with students every year on getting those awards. And it's something which is an incredible step in stone towards the next things you plan to do. And that brings me to the end. As John pointed out, feel free to write down his email address and to contact him. And we open it up now for questions.
It's too scary to ask questions. Don't forget, we were where you are just a few brief years ago. What is Answer Live? If I press, do I get to talk? So, you know, that's a great question. What gets interested? For me, I had a really great high school teacher who made me just simply love chemistry, and I loved everything about it. But in terms of the research that I do now, I didn't know in high school what I wanted to do. I knew I liked chemistry. And I also, as an undergraduate at Bowdoin College, my laboratory experience was the thing that just turned me on. I mean, classes were okay, but when I got into the lab and I started doing research and I got my hand dirty, you don't actually get your hands dirty. You don't want to do that in a chemical lab. That's what really turned me on and made me decide to go to graduate school. And what's in high school, you sort of have a picture of what you think, case chemistry might be, and you come and you get your degree and you start to get exposed to what is, when you read a textbook, it's calculus. They worked out calculus 150, 200 years ago. That's not mathematical research is. And in terms of chemical research, what you learn in the classrooms is fundamental, essential stuff have to know. But when you finally start to do research and finally start to read papers and you go to meetings and you start to talk to people and see the fields and the amazing projects that they're working on, your whole vision of what you think chemistry is it completely goes out the window, because you'll be like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that was a field. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. I didn't even know that involved chemistry. And you'll just see hundreds and hundreds of things like that, where your world suddenly is your oyster, and the possibilities are limitless. That's the best thing about science, right? Is that we work on some really cool stuff. Chemistry is this, right? That's chemistry. That's organic chemistry. There's a conductive polymer where you don't have metal wires, and they're organic compound. When you push current through them, they emit light. So that's the application of chemistry to make a really cool product. And there's just tons of stuff like that. So the more that you learn, and the more that you're exposed to it, the more interesting it becomes. And I'll just tell you this: and I am definitely biased because I'm a chemist. But chemistry and biochemistry are probably the smartest areas to work in. And the reason I say that is that if you want to tackle disease, or if you want to make a material, how do you tweak the properties of something? So again, sort of just try stuff and see if it works. You understand at a molecular level how things adhere to surface or how cells communicate to each other with each other, which is going to be through the release of biomolecules, right? Then you can be smart about how you research and how you design things. And so that necessarily requires having an understanding at the molecular level of what's going on, and that's chemistry, biochemistry. And so that acts as a springboard for going into engineering and going into areas of materials and going into, I don't know, the food industry, right? I mean, all of it's you pick an industry, and they're chemists and biochemists, because you can't be smart about how to design and make it without a background in those areas. And if you don't have that background, you certainly work in those areas, but you're going to be teamed up with someone who's a chemist or biochemist. So it's a really smart area to create.
I think it's really hard when you're 17 to know what you want to do with when you're 40 or 50, right? And very often careers are anything but linear. I mean, so to give you an idea about myself, I mean, when I was in high school, I was interested equally in biology, chemistry, and physics. So then I started studying chemistry and physics, which is a little bit harder. I'm from Germany. The double major is pretty much impossible. So I gave up eventually physics there because the program is a different one at the time. You had to go straight for a master's in my case, and studied chemistry. And the reason why I got into the sciences in the first place, because I was very, at the time, interested in environmental questions. So I did my PhD actually in a group for marine science. And as part of that thesis, I developed an instrumentation to analyze films at the air-sea interface, so to distinguish between oil slicks and natural slicks that occur, for example, when plankton get crushed up and surface active compounds come to the surface. And it turns out that instrument, what I developed, was a perfect tool to investigate lipids and proteins. And I became interested in that. I applied it already during my thesis, a little bit, that instrument, to that question. And so I moved then over from marine chemistry to biochemistry, biophysics, and work in that area since then. And what fascinates me is that I feel, as a chemist and biochemist, you're at the core of solving fundamentally important questions. Let's be blunt. Without chemists and biochemists, there would be no vaccine right now. And there are many other questions. You can also go on the side of energy production. Without chemists, our energy problems will not be addressed. It's impossible. You need chemists for that. And so it's something which is extremely fascinating to be involved in. And I enjoy doing research incredibly. At the same time, if you ask me, why am I a professor, which is also a question which comes up, because I'm equally enjoying teaching. So for me, this combination of research and teaching, which in particular I can do at the best level possible at WPI, is something that gets me going, and I enjoy it every single day. And so I did not regret my decision to go that path. But what I would like to point out is that WPI also allows you to correct your decision. WPI is it's very easy to change majors, for example. Let's say you find that after a year, chemistry is not the best place for you. There might be something else that interests you more as you become exposed to more things while being at the university. It takes you 5 minutes to change a major. You go online and you change your major and you're done. I mean, I would advise you to speak to some advisors before you're doing this, but in theory, from the administrative side of things, it's a very simple thing. And that is how WPI's curriculum is designed. And that's an important flexibility, which I cannot overstate.
I started out as a biology major, and then I switched to biochemistry. And I got into a lab doing research, and I switched to straight chemistry. And so more often than not, people do majors. It's
Absolutely.
like as Anna said, so much in common, especially in the first 2 years, that it's really easy to do.
That's fantastic.
I have to address the same question. One of the cool things about doing chemical research, and when I say that, I mean biochem and chemistry, is you talk to a lot of people and things fall in your that you would have you don't expect. They just come out of the blue. And I'll give you one instance of this. A few years ago, Plum, who is a patent attorney in Boston, went out drinking with his buddies, and somebody roofied his drink. So he had a half a beer. He said he'd had 12. And so he was really upset by that experience, and he wanted to see, could we develop a material that would detect the presence of things like rohypnol and ketamine, and then these GHB that are used just for date, where the wall of drinking container would change color. That would indicate that your drink had been spiked. And that's a continuous monitoring, other than, like a pregnancy style test that is just one and done, right? Where you dip it for polish your fingernail. And so we threw this in my lap and came to me, and we came up with a plan for how to try and tackle this. And then I had an undergrad, Jillian Meringue, and I really wanted involved in this. She showed proof of concept that could do this. And then this was spun off as a company. It is now this company called Drink Savvy. And so for me, it was totally out of my wheelhouse for the stuff that I would normally do. It turned out to be something that was really interesting to work on, and that's an important problem. So those kinds of things, when you have that background, you can extend it to others. It keeps it very interesting.
Yeah, those are great. I really appreciate you guys sharing those stories. And I know that we could probably keep chatting, and I hate to end this conversation because I am learning a lot of new things as well, which is why I love hosting these sessions. But I do know there's another session coming in behind us. So for the participants tonight, please do reach out to both Professor Garrick and Professor McDonald. They have offered their emails. They are great. If you can't find them, reach out to the admissions office. We will put you in touch. We always direct people your way. So I appreciate both of you being available to student questions. And actually, I don't know, John, if you want to drop the your email in the chat, I know the student who's asking for it will be able, or yeah, just send it to him. He'll be able to see it, and we can send that out. But I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. I thank you guys for your questions, and I thank you guys for your presentation. We'll end the recording. We will post it, but we're going to do 2 more sessions too, along with many others. So feel free to check that out. And if there's any other questions, don't ever hesitate to reach out. But thank you, Professor Garrick and Professor McDonald. We appreciate your time, and I hope everyone has a great night.
Have a good night.